Well, I'll wait till after.
Go ahead, Rennie.
I was just gonna say, as far as, well, if we're
I'm going to get something up here, just a minute.
Yep,
Okay,
Screen.
yeah, let me get this out of the way. Okay, you should have pretty much a full screen.
Yes.
Get this out of the way. Whoops, what happened here? Okay, this is on the wildlife that we have found in Zion National Park over the years. We're at actually, we just finished our 10th year there. Got back the weekend before Thanksgiving. I have another presentation coming up on Friday, which will talk a little more about the scenery and about Zion in general. So we'll jump in today with the specifics about the wildlife. Okay. This young lady here obviously has found a wild turkey walking across this hiking path. This happens to be on the main walking trail along the road that goes up Zion Scenic Canyon. I like to shoot the deer a little more back in their natural environment. I say deer, excuse me, this wild turkey here. So this is a tom turkey. He's looking at me as much as I'm looking at him. This rascal here is all decked out in his male plumage, if you will. There are also woodpeckers. This happens to be a downy woodpecker. I was able to catch him bouncing between tree to tree. And in this particular case, he's down low enough that I'm almost eye to eye with him level wise. I felt that was kind of a plus to have. Usually if I see him over at the nature center, say for an example, they're up at the top of a tree, 40 or 50 feet above me. This happens to be a California condor. The name of this particular bird is 2K. It's the 2000th bird that has been hatched. It is the first baby condor actually to be hatched in the national park and in total of southern Utah. Still alive. He'd spent a little bit, about 3 months in rehab because it happened to get lead poisoning from eating a dead animal. But he's back running around, and according to what we were seeing 2 weeks ago, he's starting to pick a mate, and with good luck, we'll have another chick or two born in Zion.
Oh,
Doug, how are you able to distinguish that particular bird and give it a name?
Well, the two parents that hatched it, one was from San Diego, one was from Texas. They keep track of these things and they band them very quickly because they are so rare. In the mid 50s, there was 22 birds worldwide.
Wow.
And this program has gotten them back right now to just a little over 500. This one with the 2K name on it indicates that it was the 2000th bird born since the mid 50s, but obviously not all of them survive.
I mean, is there a difference in the coloring or something that would distinguish so you can tell which one it is?
No, they're pretty much the same. There may be individual markings, but I'm certainly not aware of them, Alan.
Okay.
They're,
If I could
they're
break
certainly
in,
one of the largest.
I've
I'm sorry.
heard that some of them have transmitters on their bands.
Yeah, they have banded them, and a lot of them do have the transmitters. They're trying to track them and keep them as many alive as possible to revive the entire species. I will say it's one of the largest, if not the largest bird you'll find in the United States. It is larger than a turkey, and it's also a very ugly bird as far as I'm concerned. has a very ugly head on it. But it's beautiful to see him coming back. We did see one, we don't know which one it was, by itself, and then we saw two flying over top of the canyon where this area was. So they're still out and about. Here we have just a basic ground chipmunk. Quite a common animal in there. One thing I was not able to photograph, we did see a couple fox one time, but they are so rare and they tend to be more of a nocturnal animal. I just could not get enough information on my camera to walk away with them. There is a small herd of buffalo, independently owned. It's not part of the National Park Service, but this is just outside the eastern entrance to Zion. It's about 2.5 miles outside of the entrance.
Are they free to roam into the park if they choose to do so?
No, they are in a rather large, but they're in a confined area.
Okay.
And this guy was coming the morning I was shooting these. This particular watering pond out in front was frozen solid. He had to give the ice a quick kick before he could get a drink of water. Obviously, desert mule deer, very popular in the canyon. This happens to be a mature female. This, to me, I think, is a spin off the saying, bite me. This is more of a bite myself. Here we have a young buck just breaking the surface with his antlers coming out. Now, deer lose their antlers pretty much every year, and they grow back. When we see the bighorn sheep later on, they have horns, not antlers, and they do not lose those. They stay with them the entire life. This was a buck that I have not noticed before. This is velvet. This is the antlers are just starting to form. They still have velvet on them, which is literally a soft, almost fur-like condition on them. And the points are just starting to come out.
Wow.
First time we'd seen that in the 10 years we were there. Little more longer set of antlers, they've been around a little longer. I included this photograph because I've always, in most of my presentations, talk a lot about using depth of field, and particularly a shallow depth of field, to bring as much attention to the subject. You can see with the shallow depth of field, and this happened to be 6.7 f-stop, I was able to blur these background twigs and branches. Had I not, if I was shooting an f11 or an f16, these antlers would have literally been just simply gobbled up by the background branches, and you really would not have been able to see them very well. So again, I like to use as narrow as a depth of field as I can. Now, I'm not a connoisseur of deer, but I do understand for those deer hunters that they count these points and they count them on both sides. And that defines how large the animal is when it comes to identifying them. Here we have 4 on the main antlers and these 2 little stubs. As long as these are 1 inch or taller, they qualify as a full point. So if I do the math, this is the 10-point buck. A little different location. This is not quite in the deep forest like the other one was. We've got a little bit right up here of a point coming. I don't think that would qualify, but that's probably still a 8 or 9 point buck. We go in November every year, and that tends to be what's called the rutting season. The rutting season is just a different word for the mating season. The mammals, the large mammals like this, are very attentive to trying to find a mate and mating to bring on the new crop of babies in the spring. So that's what this young man is, his attention is drawn to. He knows I'm there, but he's not looking at me because he's more concerned about what he's seeing over there. I like to find sometimes the more unique or interesting photographs. While I think that's a great photograph, doing something out of the ordinary, catching him doing something out of the ordinary adds to the photograph. And here he's trying to scratch his neck. This happens to be a very young buck with a group of females. I kind of put this in the category of a high school lad trying to ask a young lady to the prom who's with a bunch of her friends. He's a little shy, maybe a little timid, but he'll probably get there, but it's just going to take him a while. This guy here, a little more serious. He's older. He knows more of the right approach to get what he's looking for or sensing for. He's doing what's called trumpeting. He's calling out. The females will hear that call, and there's a little different call per each male. And he's basically calling his young lady friend to come on over and let's get together. Here we see a shot. We're up in the high country now where the bighorn sheep are. This gentleman happens to be named Chuck. He was another amateur photographer up in the high country taking pictures. I ran into him. We were talking early one morning, and I'm over here shooting bighorns that are kind of off to our left. These three gals come walking up to him. They have a natural curiosity. So just like we saw with the turkey on the first picture, you can get shots of these animals right on the road and very close to you. Generally, you're asked to stay about 25 to 30 yards away from animals like this. If you're in Yellowstone and you're coming across a grizzly bear, there they say they want 50 to 60 yards away.
Yeah.
This is how I typically will find them. You'll notice these little white portions of their fur on their butts. This is 9 bighorn sheep. Typically, when you see a herd like this, there'll be an alpha male and maybe some younger males. There's a younger male right here. But where they turn and you don't see those butts, you have a tendency to lose them. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, can you see the 9th one in here? He's the alpha male. I'm probably a quarter of a mile away from this herd. And the male is turned sideways and he's almost lost in the picture. Can anybody see him there?
Yeah, right in center, almost.
Nope, he's right here. The far right-hand side.
Oh,
That's the alpha ram right there. You can tell he's got a little longer horns. Bighorn sheep are herd type animals. Their patterns on any given day is typically they'll be up and foraging for food in the early morning twilight hours of a day. As they get an hour or two in, they'll find a place to hunker down on the ground and kind of just digest their food. Some animals chew their cud. After a while, hour or two, they'll start to slowly pick up and walk off and go back to their food source. And then they'll come down and lay down again. Another group or herd I saw, all the rams are lined up here with the alpha ram and some younger rams. These animals, I'll show a little later, do get very territorial. They do get very aggressive towards each other. The alpha male will turn away some challenges by the younger guys. Notice that they're on rocks. Saw it back here. They're on rocks. Any idea why that might be? They don't have a lot of land, obviously, in these kind of country, but any idea why that might be?
Warm, stay warm.
That's very excellent. That's exactly what they're doing. This could be 30 degrees. This could be 20 degrees. The sun falling on these large rock sections absorbs the heat. So when they're bedded down in between meals, They use these rock surfaces to kind of keep warm.
Mhm.
Now here you see holly bushes. Holly bushes are their primary food source for one, the nutritional value of it, but also the moisture value. This holly plant maintains or retains a lot of moisture, so they're able to get a lot of their moisture they need from eating the plants. Now this, a little smaller herd,
Mhm.
this is about, at least a mile off the main road. I had spotted these guys moving around, so I got out of the car and headed in towards to where I thought they might be. You can tell by the looking at me, this herd has probably more concerned about my presence there than the ones we saw here. And we definitely have caught the eye of this alpha ram. So at this stage, I would probably do one of a couple things. If I went forward, I would probably drive the herd away, either very slowly, doubtful. If I went too much closer, they would probably turn and run, which is a behavior I would prefer not them to do, because when they're running, there's always a chance of tripping and falling and hurting themselves.
Mhm.
But in this stage, we've got an alpha male, we've got 3 ewes, females, and we've got 2 lambs that were born in the spring. Again, this is November. So I just took my picture and backed off, and this guy kind of calmed down a little bit. Here we have a ewe again. Here's that holly bush. Couple rams buried their head down inside the bush. Again, they're getting not only nourishment, but they're also getting water. Again, shallow depth of field. We happen to have some side lighting going on, which is giving just a little bit of a rim light to the animals, making them stand out even more. Deep shade, heavy shade. Got a ram, again, eating the holly bush. Now, there is a way that on rams with their horns that you can kind of count the rings, very similar to counting a tree. The first hard line, you see one here, one here. You got one here, one here, one here. The first time you get to the first ring like that, that's 3 years. So we got a 4th year, a 5th year, a 6th year, a 7th year. Probably this is an 8th year, and the 9th year right at the head. So I'm going to guess that's a 9-year-old ram.
How long do they generally live?
They can live in well into the teens.
Hmm.
Just depends. Obviously, we talked about them getting scared and running off, breaking a leg or falling down and hurting themselves. That's obviously a natural attrition. Fortunately, in the national parks, these are not hunted. I will talk about that when we get over to the presentation on Friday, a little more about that, as to how long these bighorn sheep have been in that area. Here we have a female. They do not have the pronounced easy to count rings like the rams do. I'm doing selective focus. We've got the background out of focus, the foreground out of focus, and the animal itself in deep, clear, sharp focus. Animals like this do have a natural curiosity. If you tend to be moving around, and if you stop from time to time and take just a few minutes to stand still, quite often these animals will come towards you just to find out what you are and are you a danger to them. And that's what this young lady did to me. I had kind of stopped. I'm probably again that 25 to 35 yards away using a telephoto, and she came and she was walking kind of left to right. And as she saw me, she stopped, turned, and looked right at me and got a little closer. Some natural framing going on here as far as the technique. Here we have a spring lamb in that November time frame. They are born with their horns. They don't actually start after they're born. They're born with them. Again, just a tiny bit of selective focus. The background definitely wanted it out of focus so it doesn't distract from the shot of the animal itself. This is called the Fleshman response. This is deep into the mating behavior. Birds will get a plumage. Mammals like this will display their, we'll call it their teeth and their gums, and they'll make noises. This is very similar to what a horse can do. They raise their upper lips and expose their teeth. He is smelling or trying to catch the odor of a female. And when he does, when he's detecting that one female might be ready, he will go ahead and do his best to mate with that animal. And a few minutes later after this, he and this young lady here consummated their relationship, and hopefully they'll have a baby in the spring. Here we have pure testosterone. These are 3 rams. This is not actually the largest of the 3, that's over here, but he is the alpha male. Now, when I first encountered these guys, they were by themselves, and this guy, I didn't even know where he was. About 100 yards away off the camera right, he starts running to approach these 2. He's grunting, he's snorting, and he comes over here and he's dropped that head and he's ready for battle. He is trying to assert his authority over these 2 rams. Now, this ram doesn't seem to be too concerned about him. This ram is giving him the stink eye as to what he's up to. Eventually, that ram turned around and got behind him, and he's over here pushing against this guy, trying to provoke him, trying to assert his authority over him. Eventually it did. They came to some kind of settlement, and they got along for the rest of the time I was there, laying on my belly, by the way, down here below them, trying to, because there's so little light. This is well past the time that the sun went down up in the high country. Now, if this did not work, what this very often leads to is some mortal, I won't say mortal combat, head-to-head combat, where these rams will butt head. You got the challenger and you've got the alpha. They will stand back 3 or 4 body lengths away. They'll rear up on their hindquarters and just charge each other and ram their heads together. Now, you can hear this well into the 1/4, 3/8 of a mile away. That clack, bam, when they hit is so loud. Eventually, one of them is going to win. And you can tell by their eyes, they've had some pretty hard struggles going on there. Eventually, the alpha ram won, and this guy just settled down. You'll notice this is one of the GPS locators that the sheep were getting. We were up in 2018, and I had the opportunity to go along with the Forest Service and the state of Utah when they were first applying these for the first time. These typically last about 3 years. They're satellite tracking, and they're literally there to track their patterns as they move around. We were again there 2012, a few weeks ago, and by far they're really starting to put more collars out. When we were there that first week, when they started doing this, they were able to plant, I think it was close to 6 or 7 of the collars over the 5 days we were there. Now, I brought this image into this conversation because I wanted you to kind of make note of the landscape around them. This is a solo ewe. They do occasionally go out by themselves as opposed to herd travel. You'll notice some of the vegetation, there's not a lot of it. What is happening, this was 2019, our last trip there before COVID. This is behind the Zion Lodge, which I'll talk more about Friday. And I was shooting a herd of deer that were back here in the vegetation. And I had saw in the corner of my eye some movement, so I panned my camera over and I took shots of these three, thinking they were deer. But when I took the camera away from my eye and I did some spotting to kind of see if I could move and get a little better shot, I realized these are bighorn sheep. They are down from the high country, down into the low country. Very, very rare, particularly in 2018, to see that happen. So I took my pictures over to the ranger area and was talking with the ranger and kind of showing him what was going on. He says, yeah, we have occasionally that year in 18 seen some of the bighorns, not very many, come down and not very often. He says what's happening is with the drought that's going on in the Southwest and in Utah, in the high country, the water sources that typically are there are drying up. Now this is showing the sandstone, and this is after rain, and this is a puddle, but because it's all hard rock, if you will, it doesn't seep into the ground. So this will stick around for a month or so. So there's some pretty reliable water sources in the high country, but now with the drought going on, the large, some smaller of the population of the bighorn sheep are working their way down into the high country. This was this year, and they're getting down here into a whole different habitat to get close to the water source. Now, as we saw, the holly bush is their primary source of food and water in the high country. Here, they're down here eating the plain old grasses, the not the wildflower, the grassy areas. So there's a change going on. This herd we saw, there's several more over here. This was probably 12 or 13 animals. 3 rams are right there together. You got one with his head down, one with his body across the back of this one, and this guy here. The Virgin River, which is the main river which caused the canyon and in the canyon, is right here at the base of that red cliff. So that's the reliable water source for them. A complete change of habitat going on during the drought season.
Mm.
All right, I'm about ready to wrap up, get on the transporter, grab my buddy here and get out of Dodge. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Great pictures,
Mhm.
Yes.
amazing pictures.
Thank you very much.
All right.
It was wonderful.
Obviously.
Nice job.
research on this.
Thank you.